Hi, Max. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Eleanor. I'm so excited to be here.
Look, it's gonna be one of my favorite show. I know that already for many reasons. First of all, because you're a friend. I love what you're doing, and second of all, because I think you are one of the generational leader that is going to completely revolutionize the world with AI. When I met you for the first time, I remember I really thought you were going to be the next Steve Jobs. And I remember someone, I'm not going to tell who that person is, that told me he's the next Elon Musk. You need to meet
Oh
that
my God.
person. And I
Well,
do
I
think
have
that
the jeans, but I haven't bought the polo yet. So let's see how we do about that.
I'm sure we'll see how your style evolve over the years, but you have an incredible potential and you've proven it already with the results that you've been publishing on Legora. Your growth is tremendous. You come from this incredible background. You are an esport player before doing Legora. You started the company not that long ago, but you've grown extremely fast. You are now serving more than 40 markets. You've raised one of the largest rounds in the world of AI today. So I'm so excited to have you today. Thank you.
Thank
So
you, Eleanor.
maybe we start with that. We start with your background. I don't know
Yeah.
what you think, but I would love to understand why law, because you don't come from a law background. So if you could explain to me, how
Well,
did
look,
you convince a firm to even start to work with you on that?
I think people have asked me, did I pick law or did law pick me? And I think law picked me more than I picked it. And so my two co-founders, August and Sigge, they started experimenting within the intersection between AI and law already in 2020. I like to say before AI was cool, but it was already kind of cool back then. And they were working with the early BERT models from Google, and especially one of the Swedish tuned versions of it. So it was called Swebert. But the problem with that model was, first off, it was not very smart. And secondly, it was trained on Swedish Reddit. So not only was it not very smart, it was also pretty racist. What happened then was we got access to GPT 3.5 in 2023 and the world changed. And they reached out to me because they wanted to apply to a local business accelerator. And so you needed somebody who went to business school. So I was the token business school guy on the PowerPoint. And that's why they reached out to me. And since then, we've never looked back. And I think we started working in the industry quite open-minded in terms of which problem we were going to solve. And I think what's been so interesting with legal is that it's so much greenfield. There are so many solutions that will be rebuilt. There are so many new things that you can now go and solve, which were impossible with the technology pre-LLMs. And so it's really been a large space to run into.
I love it. But maybe if you start with your very first customer, then I listened to some of your podcasts where you explained that you paid some people to even have lunch with you. How did
Yeah.
you convince your very first customer to work with you? Your product obviously was like you were one of the first to use this new technology. You had no track record in the space. How do you do that?
So the first paying customer was a friend's mom who I met her at the party. And she said, my mom uses ChatGPT all the time. And I said, well, she has to try Leia back then. And so she actually became our first client and she was paying us $100 a month. And she's still with us. So we have 100% cohort retention from July in 2023. But the real first client became Mannheimer Swartling, which was the biggest law firm in the Nordics. And they actually had an innovation incubator. And so I managed to break into the managing partner's calendar, which somebody told me would be harder than breaking into the Fort Knox. But I managed to do it. I got the meeting, 30 minutes, and I approached it very much from the perspective of you don't know AI, I don't know law. AI is going to be incredibly important for your company, and so we should be collaborating. And we couldn't afford an office space at the time because we had only raised an angel round of 50,000 euros. So we actually got invited to work from within the firm. And very, very quickly, we started showing our potential. And we got the technology in the hands of the lawyers. We passed all the security and compliance and data privacy questions that they had. And we started iterating really quickly. And I think one of the superpowers that you have as a small team, and we definitely had in the beginning, and we're trying to keep very much now as we continue to grow, is this iteration cycle. So we would bring the product on our laptops to the lunch canteen and we would show lawyers there at the firm what it could do, and would say, hey, input the legal query, and we're gonna like respond to it for you. And once we got a couple of successful use cases, that started spreading like wildfire in the firm. And they're still with us today, and a very close partner. And I think another thing that did was it showed that the top firm in this market made a bet on Leia. So other firms were quick to follow. And we grew very, very quickly in the Nordics. And then we made the jump over to Central Europe, to the UK, and to the US as we sort of found that product market fit.
I love it. I love it. And clearly you went extremely fast. And I'm really impressed also by how you managed to have firms really see your platform as their main competitive advantage today. That's very impressive. You spoke a lot too about the second mover advantage. I'm curious to know, what did you learn from others in the space and what were you able to do differently? Clearly you have the best platform out there. I know it because of what my team tells me internally. I would love to know what you've learned and how do you differentiate here?
Yeah, so I think when we started in 2023, it was not obvious that you shouldn't fine-tune models. The models were so new, and I think there was a lot of debate in the industry what the best course of action was. And because we didn't have the funding, and because we were the second mover, I think we just made a bet, which was let's use every frontier model and let's build all of our functionality like boats so that when the tide rises, everything improves. And then we focused a lot on the application itself. So how do we make it possible to work with 100 documents and not just 10 documents? How do we make it possible to connect to the web, which was a very early functionality which we added to the platform? And we sort of saw holes, I think, in the armor of some of the bigger players. And there's a couple of incumbents as well in the legal AI space who are kind of pivoting from being legacy information publishers to trying to be software companies. And a lot of what they built did not really make sense from a software perspective. So we just put all of our energy into the platform layer. And I actually remember writing a memo to the entire company back in end of 2024, which basically said that there's a couple of key use cases that we're competing on. Drafting in Word was one of them, or running large document extractions was another. And so we don't have to be best at everything. We just have to be best at these three things. And if we are that, then it's going to make sense for every legal team to work with Legora. Now, that has obviously grown a lot since 2024. And now we have 10 product teams running at different things in parallel, both sort of short-term bets and long-term bets. But I think it allowed us to prioritize better. I think the other thing, Eléonore, from a go-to-market perspective, was that a couple of the legal AI players were so early that they burnt themselves. And when a lawyer works with a tool, if it's not perfect, it's not good enough. And so what happened was a lot of people tried AI back in early 2023 and they hated it. And then when we came sort of mid 2024 and showed them something really exciting that worked, we immediately got a lot more trust. And we actually made a conscious bet sort of after our first board meeting. After we had raised $35 million, we said, we are not going to sell. And that was not super popular with the VCs, but it turned out to be the right choice.
I love it. And I think we can clearly hear how bold you've been in terms of the product roadmap and how fast you've been able to execute. And I think that holds true not only for that, but for everything you do. So if I look at you go to market, you've been very bold with the Jude Law campaign recently, but also in the way you've decided to build your company globally. So from basically day one to now, you have 40 markets. I know that very early on, you took a flight to India for a customer. You opened India just like that. So it's very impressive. So what was behind that decision? And would love to know, what pushed you to do that? And what was also the hardest thing to get right when you expanded that early to so many markets?
So I think one thing as a European founder and as a European company, you have to learn is how to go to a new market. Because many of the individual markets are too small to build a generational company within. And so we started in Sweden, but very quickly went to Finland, to Spain, to France, to Germany. And the biggest jump for us was to the US. And when you look at the reasoning behind that, the US is the biggest market. but we have learned the motion of going to a new market very early on in the company's lifetime. And that strategy for us sort of boiled down to when we go to a new market, the product has to be integrated with local legal knowledge, so case law, legislation, etc. And we need to partner with a winning brand and a winning firm and a winning enterprise. And so when we went to India, for instance, we did so with one of the top law firms, Can. And when that came out in the market, suddenly all the other firms also want to talk to us. And all the other enterprises and their clients start to get interested. And so we've been very thoughtful in terms of how we do it. But the product also internationalized very well from day one. The legal technology stack for big enterprises and legal teams is almost the same across different types of companies and law firms as well. And this meant it very sort of became easy for us to retrofit what we were building into that. And now we have teams all the way from the west coast of the US, UK, and Australia. So we really cover the whole world. And I think the main challenge with that is actually some of the internal operations. It's not how you develop the product or how you go to market, but it's communications. As the team grows so quickly, we went from 40 people to 400 in less than 12 months. And when you do that across 24-hour time zones, you really need to work to keep everything together.
That's beyond impressive. What's next for you then? When you think about that, about your expansion, go-to-market expansion, but also like product expansion, would you mind sharing with us what's next? Because I know you have unlimited ambition here. So
yes, well, the most important thing for us is to go deeper in the vertical where we are already serving some of the biggest clients, and the increase in intelligence that we've seen in the LLMs have sort of helped us solve a lot of the shallow application layer. But now we are going very, very deep on legal work. And what I'm most excited about is our new sort of agentic operating system, where we're moving from letting the LLMs basically get the query, think a bit, and just respond, where it's instead allowed to interact with all of the context in the firm. It's allowed to interact with knowledge sources, with different skills, with other tools via MCP. And it's really starting to move to becoming an end-to-end task multiplier instead of just an individual augmentation of a lawyer. So it really starts to feel like you're adding agents to your team rather than you yourself just being slightly faster because of it. And the biggest value I've seen from that is that now partners, the most senior people in the organizations that we serve, are starting to work with the technology directly. In 2025, I'd say the biggest user group of Legora was the associates. So the young professionals working with Legora to be faster, to be better, to get an extra pair of eyes. But now the partners are really starting to utilize it and to give tasks directly to the agents because they know what they can expect in terms of outputs. And I think that's really exciting. As we look across the entire stack as well, we're getting pulled into adjacent areas like tax, and we're starting to work with compliance and risk. And so even within the core customers where we're embedded, we drove a 300% net revenue retention last year. And so we're really sort of starting to expand, which I'm excited about.
That's numbers that are quite unparalleled. And I love that shift. We see the same is the capability now for managers, for executives to actually be directly in the platform interacting with agents. It's quite unbelievable. And obviously, so the technology is evolving extremely fast. We've all experienced the same, that in the past 4 to 5 months, the power of technology has evolved so fast that we have to act very fast ourselves in terms of the product roadmap to adapt to that. So I've heard you say that you actually plan quarterly. Perhaps now you even plan monthly. I don't know, because AI moves so fast. So how do you still have your long-term vision while working with short-term planning, and is quarterly is now even too long?
I think quarterly is definitely too long for a product roadmap, but you need to know where you want to be a quarter from now. And so you can iterate really quickly. And I mean, with the agentic software tools, we can also build really quickly. But we also work in an enterprise setting where the clients that we work with expect us to spell out where the product is going to be 3 months from now so that they can plan as well. Because even if we can build things really quickly, the adoption and the implementation of that technology also needs to happen. And that's not being run at the cycle of an agent, that's being run at the cycle of a person and a person's ability to change the way that they work, etc. And the long-term vision has remained the same. We are augmenting legal work with AI, and we are building Legora to become the place where legal work happens, either by a person or by a machine or together. And I think that line will continue to blur in different areas. Let's say you're working on a big transaction. I would say it's almost unethical today to not leverage AI in reviewing the data room, because the AI will find things that a human will not. We actually just recently did a big return on investment study by a third party who spoke with 30 of our biggest clients and found that 71% of all lawyers, when they work with Legora, they find things they otherwise wouldn't have, which I think is a very large number. And it kind of means that not working with AI on almost everything becomes suboptimal. I think the tricky thing, though, Eléonore, and I'm sure you're finding the same, is the culture and the person's ability to take in all of this new technology and a new way of working, because it's very hard to be a professional and do the work at the same time as you are responsible for innovating the way that it's done.
We see the same. Our main customer is the office of the CFO, so we have very, very similar stories at Pigment. So you spoke about the fact that clearly your vision stays the same, you have the same North Star. I'm wondering also, in the way you run your company, what are some of the core principles that have to remain constant given how fast the world is moving?
That's interesting. I think the most important thing as the company grows is to be aligned on that big goal and distribute decision-making power. Because when the company grows in terms of organizational structure, if all of the decisions still sort of are stuck at the top, then you become a bottleneck very, very quickly. And what we try to think about is what are irreversible decisions and what are reversible decisions. And if a decision is such that you can make it quickly and you can reverse if it was the wrong decision, then make it very quickly and keep working. If it's a bigger decision that requires analysis, I think the most important thing is to make that analysis part quick. So aggregating data, hooking that up with our internal AI bots, and really sort of democratizing access to knowledge and information in the company. I think that has been a learning of doing that both in a way that speeds up the work, but is also compliant with the way that we handle our customers' data and things like this. I think another part, which is that as the company grows, you want to make sure that everybody has one main job. And if everybody has one main job and does that thing really well, then the entire machinery works. What we found is that some of these really floating roles are a bit trickier and can create unclarity in the organization when we need to be fast. And so we really tried to build out sort of one person, one role, and not really sort of think about teams that much. I think there's a lot of cross-department collaboration that naturally needs to happen in order for a company to move fast.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Since we started to talk about culture, I would love maybe to hear more about how you are running Legora. And if you could maybe explain first, you as a CEO, how you're using AI on your day-to-day, and are there specific tools or workflows that now you couldn't live without?
Well, I think just sort of labeling all emails, putting some things in FYI, read later, making a first draft on everything that comes in, using my own context graph. That's sort of the lowest bar and what's very useful to me. I think the other thing is just keeping up with what's happening across the org. So for instance, hooking into Linear and seeing where different projects are and getting a triaging of that, so that you don't need to tap somebody on the shoulder and ask how something is going. You get a proactive update. Interacting with the CRM, we work with Salesforce, and just having our AI be able to make actions with Salesforce has been quite nice. Task generation after executive meetings, proactive reminders that get sent out if people haven't done the thing that they said that they were going to do. But I'm actually most impressed by the engineering team and their ability to run fast. And I do think engineering plays as a nice North Star, even for what other work can lead to. And there's very few lines of code being written manually at this point, which I think if anybody would have said that 2 years ago, they would have thought that it was witchcraft. And even in our ability to sort of, a bug comes in from Slack that gets triaged in Linear, and then Cursor looks at it and makes the first PR. And then a review bot looks at that PR and says if it's high security or low security, and if a person needs to review it. And if a person needs to review it, it's already written the code, it's run all the tests, and you just approve it if it's good. Right? Like, I think that way of working is really interesting, but it does put a limit on the engineering team's ability to review a lot of the AI generated code. And so I really want to take our best in class habits from APD and scale that across the entire company. Because I do think that marketing, finance, HR, like everybody else has a lot to learn from. The CEO office has a lot to learn from what EPD is doing, at least at Legora.
And do you have an idea of how you think about prioritizing? Because obviously you can do AI projects in the entire company. How do you think about which one you want to look at next?
So I think this is the way that we've structured it. We have a central sort of functionality hub that is available to every team. And then we are embedding AI operations in all of the teams. So marketing will have its own marketing engineer. Legal is easy because the legal team at Legora runs on Legora. But we sort of embed that AI capability across the different functions, and then they get to use this central hub that is set up in a compliant and scalable way. I think the most important thing for me is how do we make those things accessible to people so that every person who is curious and who's leaning in can take that to their department and to their own work and actually put it to action. I think that's more important than a top-down decision of going, hey, we need more AI here. And I think that may come as we continue to grow, but at the same time, I think the culture at Legora is very curious, fast-moving, I'll do it myself type of way. But it's important then to set up all the building blocks so that they exist in a compliant and good way.
I love the approach. I also wonder if there is, to the contrary, something you've tried with AI that just didn't work yet at the company.
Oh, that's a great question. The funny thing is, I felt like a lot of the things that didn't work with AI now work as the models have improved. I mean, I remember coding a lot with AI the first summer we got started, and it was pretty much useless in 2023. It was almost more effective just to work with tab autocomplete than trying to like iterate with the AI because it would freak out so much. But then go back to that problem a year later and it's a completely different experience. So there may be some things that we've tried that we need to go back to for sure. I remember trying to like screen profiles on LinkedIn. And I think the most important thing that it again boils down to is just like, what's the individual mindset of the people working here? And are they enabled to run fast? Like my sister works at a company where they are not allowed to use AI on certain things, which is making them run really slow. And I just don't think that you can be in an environment like that if you want to move fast. And I do think that learning the skills of working with AI today will set up you as a professional to be more successful in the future. And we will certainly have, some very small and mean and lean teams at Legora that do a lot because they are so AI pilled. And I think that this is a real advantage that you have building a company today versus having a really big company and trying to scale that down because you're inherently, not so motivated if you are in a big team like that and the management comes and says, hey, let's implement AI and it's going to free up 25% capacity, because then there's a question of, well, what is that capacity now going to go and work on? And so I think getting to do it from scratch has been really fun and helpful for us.
And you started to talk about the talents. I'm really sorry for your sister, by the way. But clearly, if you want these teams to be really AI powered, you need the right talents. And I know you've described looking for curiosity combined with ambition in hiring. It can be hard to spot that. I was wondering concretely if you could explain what you are testing in the interview process. What are you looking for to find the talents that are going to obviously create a new path, because a lot of things haven't been done yet in AI?
So I think ambition can be found if you have a history of having done something exceptional. And that can be in sports, that can be in school, that can be in a professional environment, that can be in a video game environment. But you have to have this innate want to sort of be the best or to really push things to the limit. And I think if you just approach life with this, in Sweden, we would call it the medium fat milk. It's like, it's not the full fat milk, it's not the light milk, it's the middle one. And that's like a bit average. I don't think you can approach life like that and be successful at Legora, to be honest. And curiosity, I've found that curious people tend to go down weird rabbit holes. And so I often ask people to explain the latest rabbit hole they went down and to teach me about a new subject or a new problem that I don't know anything about. And if they know nothing really weird about something that's really off, then that tends to also be a person who's maybe not so curious. And that could be anything. Once in an interview, I got a explanation and a live walkthrough of how to play the violin. And they brought it up and started, and they had, just learned like a month ago or something. And I think that's a type of person who will do very well here. I think the third one maybe is just like this, mindset of you can just do things. And even though we started Legora in Sweden, we have now become a smaller legal market than the biggest customer that we serve today, right? We've started to become global and ubiquitous, and we're sponsoring Jude Law, and we're getting Aaron Judge and the New York Yankees, and we're building product that is so exciting and so new and so fresh. And I think this innate want to just win and to do it at a very large scale, and to recognize that large language models like this technology wave that we're now experiencing will only happen once. And I'm sure that people were in the late 90s feeling like this about the internet. And now, I mean, both you and I, but also everybody working in our companies get to experience and be part of that, like very special moment in time. And I just think you need to seize it. Like you need to grab that opportunity and you need to run.
Yeah, I cannot agree more, and really love the concrete example you gave around hiring. The rabbit hole is a great one. It's a great one.
Yeah.
It's the first time I hear this one. I really like it. If you think about, I think it's always great also for people to learn about mistakes. And so I wonder, you as a founder, if you think about some decision you made in the early day, are there some you wouldn't do again if you were starting from scratch today?
I think that there's always individual mistakes around product or people or customers that you regret and would do differently, knowing the outcome. But I don't think that I would have done them differently, knowing what I knew then. I think the biggest learning from several mistakes that I've been close to making, but then got advised to not go down, is around think bigger. I think early on, we were maximizing locally. We were thinking about how can we serve a big Swedish customer? How can we hire great talent here? How can we get a good Swedish investor? And my advisors and others sort of continuously pushed me to go, no, but Max, like you have imposter syndrome. You guys are great. Like you need to go bigger. And I think we've had that imposter syndrome for a while. And I think that might culturally come from a thing which in Swedish culture is called jantelagen, or the law of jante, which basically means that you shouldn't think that you are something, or you shouldn't like boast about your achievements. And we had to unlearn that quite quickly in order to stake up against the Americans. And so when we got to Y Combinator, that was a big boost in confidence. But still, we thought, oh my God, we're one of 200 companies, and there's going to be people from MIT and from Harvard and from Meta and all these great companies. And then throughout the process, we learned that, oh, wait a minute, we have the highest revenue out of any company in the batch, and we are growing the fastest, and we are getting the most investor interest. And wow, we're really doing it. And I think all of this has continued to build up our self-confidence and our ability to go and do bigger things. But thinking back, I do think that we could have moved even faster or done even bigger things if we went in with the idea of, let's be the biggest versions of ourselves.
Yeah, that's great. But that's very humbling too, because you are moving extremely fast. How do you learn so fast, by the way, Max? Tell me. I'd love to know. I know from common investors and other people that we know in common that you are one of the fastest learner of our generation. What do you do to achieve that?
For me, it's easy to watch people do things and then copy that. I'm a quite like a visual learner in that sense. I used to work in VC, and so I knew what a great VC pitch from one of the companies I met would look like. And then I copied that. And I think I've continuously done so. I think in products, like great artists steal. And you take the best components from different things and you put them together into something even bigger. I tend to not only rely on my own opinion, but get a lot of people in the business to chip in. I just wrote this like strategic memo that we're going to send out in a couple of days here. And that is really like a mutual effort of many people in the company. And I send it out for different takes. I even sent it to my dad to get his take on it. And I think you just need to approach life and work knowing that you don't know anything and be a type of personality and a type of person that other people want to succeed. If other people want you to succeed, that's much easier than you having to like prove everybody wrong in a way. And that's how I try to get the most leverage from what I know and from what other people around me know. My main job at this point, and I'm sure you feel the same, is, or maybe you don't feel the same, is to hire people smarter than myself, in their craft. And your job or my job just becomes more and more to help orchestrate that group.
Yeah, cannot agree more. You are obviously a European founder with global ambition. You started to explain you go to market and how you had to quickly expand to different countries. What about Europe in general? What are the biggest strengths of building from Europe, whether it's the talents or anything else that you'd like to share here?
We have a chip on our shoulder, which is that we don't want the West Coast to rule our lives. And we need European companies to win in AI. And we all wake up every morning and feel that hunger. And we run and we bond together and we cheer each other on with all the other companies that are in our market here as well. And I think that in the US, there's sometimes this notion of like, what's flavor of the month? Like, let's go work there. And you tend to build companies of mercenaries rather than missionaries. And Legora is a team of missionaries who have all grouped together to work on this really, really large problem and serve this wonderful market and build a delightful product. The sharing of that experience, I think, like really bonds us together and has created an environment where it really feels like the enemies are outside the gates. And like within the gates, we are all doing this together and we get to do it from our own country with our own culture. The company has also expanded a lot. We have a very big office in New York. But I think that American plus European has now started to blend itself quite nicely in our real global efforts.
I cannot agree more on the missionaries versus mercenaries. What are some of the weaknesses then that we find in Europe, and how do you actually overcome them with learning from the US or the...
The first time I met with Benchmark, it was a VC in the US. Apparently, after I went outside of the room, Peter Fenton turned to Chafin, who's now on our board, and said, "The guy is perfect. The only problem is he lives in Sweden." And I do think that there's this initial like inertia about statistically, you're much more likely to be successful starting a company in San Francisco, depending on what type of vertical and company you're building. But you have had these big European outliers like Spotify and Skype and others. And I do think that it's rarer. And so you need to really work against the feeling of the crowd. And you need to show that you have an American mindset, but you're building from Europe in a way. And the other local problem that we've had is just B2B talent. So Sweden and where we work has been exceptional from a product and engineering and design point of view, but there are no really successful B2B AI or SaaS companies in our market. And so when you want to hire a great B2B enterprise sales leader, that just doesn't exist. And so you do need to go outside the market. And I think that has worked very well for us because we've built up this hub in Stockholm, New York, and London, which marry together very nicely. But there are certain specific talent and gaps that I think you really do need to fill. And then you also need to be ready to travel a lot. I heard you're going to the US to sign a big deal soon, which I'm excited for. And it's been the same for me. Last year, I was 200 days on a plane. And that is just wild. But that's the way of the world. And if you want to build from here.
Yeah, we live the same story. You said, obviously, you explained how you learn and how much you learn from other companies. What do you learn? And specifically, I don't know if even if you have concrete example of who do you learn from, whether it's US founders or European founders. I would love to get a couple of concrete examples here too, about the best of both worlds.
I like to copy like certain things, but I wouldn't say that I have like a big idol. And I'll give you an example. So I had to do a speech when we hit 100 million, and I hadn't prepared anything, but I naturally went to this speech that Jim Carrey did at the Golden Globe, I think, because I watched that on YouTube when I was like 15 or something. And I remember that speech because it was really funny. And he talks about, tonight he's not going to sleep as any normal Jim Carrey. He's going to sleep as a Golden Award winner, Jim Carrey. And I like did this whole talk for the company about how, they're not going to sleep as any normal like Legorian. They're going to sleep as the fastest 1 to 100 in enterprise sales Legorian. And that is incredible. And I think naturally I'm better at borrowing things than coming up with completely new or novel things. And this is anything from interview questions or how we write our job ads or how I structure my meetings. I'm like, if something has been invented and it works, why not just take it? I tend to save, and I don't know if this is a survival mechanism, but I try to save my mental energy for the things that actually require mental energy. Very similarly to my meeting cadence, I'm actually a quite introverted guy. I don't like going to mingles, like energy is sort of drawn when I spend a lot of time in meetings. And so between meetings, I look like I'm having a really bad time. And I'm like sitting by my desk with resting bitch face. And people are like, Max, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm great. I'm just recharging. And then you get into a meeting and you expand all of it. And it's really great. But I do think that I try to sort of pick the best raisins in the cookies, as you would say in Swedish, from what others are doing and what we can do at Legora.
Thank you so much for sharing. Everything you said is such an inspiration for me, and I'm sure for other founders or operators. That was fantastic. And I mean, I'm so impressed by your vision, of course, but your capability to execute is just unprecedented and quite unbelievable. If that works with you, I would love to end with a quick fire questions. And I would like to start with one thing you've learned from being a pro esport gamer that makes you a better CEO today.
You have to grind to get good.
You have to. Do you have to grind more as a CEO or as an esport?
You really work up a good pain threshold when you're used to getting screamed at by 12-year-olds for screwing up. And I think that's very helpful as a CEO.
Is it harder to be a CEO than an esports gamer?
Yes.
Why?
Because the types of problem that you solve are new all the time. And so in the video game I used to play, you play the same map and then you pick a hero and you sort of play out different scenarios over and over and over and over and over again. And so it's more of a habit builder, I would say. I think being a CEO, at least in today's environment, is a lot more about how good you are at making decisions on the fly and how good you are at navigating a quite complex world, which I think are two different skill sets. And I think the second is harder.
Yeah, makes total sense. What's the one thing you wish you'd learned earlier about leadership beyond thinking bigger?
I wish that I had put more of an emphasis on my people management skills and how to really build rapport and focus on that as much. Like the organization is as much of your product as the actual product. I've pivoted that attention, but I wish I would have done it sooner.
That's a great way to think about it. Best piece of advice you've received, and who was it from?
So I got asked this question a few times, and I think I say different things every time because it's like the thing top of mind for me. Right now, I think the best piece of advice is to really think about our entire stack and the ownerships and the incentives across that stack, and not just be too focused on our part of the world, but like really think about the entire system and where we live in that.
Makes sense. If you weren't building Legora or potentially be a pro esport gamer, what would you be doing?
Maybe AI for tax? No, maybe robotics. I find that very exciting. Now we're building the digital version of intelligence and how that will shape knowledge work and interact with people. I think there would be an equally large aspect of this, which is interacting with the physical world, which I think would be really exciting and a lot of really hard problems to solve as well.
Yeah, indeed. And there are a couple of incredible companies that are starting in the space we see are solving great problems. Is there one book that influenced you on how you think about business that you'd like to share?
Well, I guess this is like a bit cliche, but I read The Hard Thing About Hard Things when I was very young. And I think I read it way before starting Legora. And I think that book impacted me a lot in the way that I became excited about starting a company. The book that I give out to all the managers at Legora today is called Amp It Up. I don't know if you read it by...
Yeah, it's a great one. Yeah. I mean, one of the best CEOs out there for sure. So
yes. And it's also, I love the look on the manager's face when they get a book that says Amp It Up, how to maximize the urgency in the organization. And they're like, okay, I got it. Like, this is what we're doing.
That's great. That's great. Do you still read a lot today?
No.
Yeah.
I'm a better talker and doer than I am a reader.
We talked about the people you're hiring. What is the one skill that people will need more of in an AI native world?
I think it's process thinking or systems thinking or whatever you want to call it, and not just focus on doing the thing, but focus on the system that sort of does the thing and what's the end-to-end process. Because if you can think about that, it's much easier to understand where AI will fit into it.
Makes sense. Thank you. Max, that was so great. Really fantastic to have you. Cannot thank you enough for sharing your wisdom with us. And I can't wait to see you soon. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Eléonore. This was fantastic.